I have to get rid of all of these. There we go. Cool. Sorry about that, guys. Just a heads up, I kind of woke up sick today, so if I cough in your ear and I ramble off a little bit, I want to apologize in advance. I'll be talking about Recon for bug bounties today and kind of share my method of how I do my Recon with when it comes down to bug bounties. So who am I? I am a hacker and a bug bounty participant. I currently work at HackerOne as a security associate. I co-founded Bug Bounty Forum for hackers to get connected. We publish a lot of content for hackers, whether you're new or you're already established in the community. I currently hack on HackerOne and Bugcrowd, being number 15 on HackerOne and number 29 on Bugcrowd. So an agenda of what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of why we should do this. Then we're going to move on to the traditional way of how hackers are doing their recon, mostly with brute forcing, and then we're going to move on to different methods that I have done on my own that hackers are using currently to find more resources and more bugs. So one of them being using AWS, other one being GitHub, and then number 5 is where we use other third-party tools like Shodan and Census and a couple other methods. So why should we care about doing recon? First of all, it gives us a bigger attack surface. It gives us more bugs, which we all want to do, and we all want to have more bugs to submit to programs. More bounties. At the end of the day, we all wanted to find more bugs and get paid or get points, swag, or whatever it is that we're in this for. But at the end of it all, it's going to give us more problems. So the methodology that currently for a brute force of the website they want to recon on. So if you're looking for a subdomain, if you're looking for subdomains, your initial move would be to go to the brute forcing tool, just the ones on the right, like sublister, normal, mass DNS, alt DNS, and so on, and you pretty much brute force for it. So there's a little twist to that I like to do on the side is I like to find patterns. So if I see a corporate domain or a staging domain, I like to just go ahead and specifically subdomain brute force for that pattern. And then I can add different prefixes to the domains to find more different staging environments, actually. You can also use Google. You can go on there and, the traditional way of doing site.com and excluding the domains that you don't like or you already know about. I highly recommend doing the brute force and then moving on to actual looking for staging environments, especially if the bug bounty program is including all their properties, all the web properties in their scope. That kind of gives you guys a bigger overview of what you're working with. There are less limitations on development sites and staging sites. And obviously on the corporate websites, there's times where there's no login in front of some stuff, or you can do recon on those corporate domains to find more juicy information. So moving on to Amazon Web Services. Based on the research I did, and when I do my bug bounty hunting, I see a lot of companies relying on AWS. So as a part of my recon, these are a couple of things that I do just as a start. So first I look for S3 buckets. One of the ways of doing that is just going on Google and looking up s3.amazonhouse.com and then giving it a pattern, domain, whatever you want to look for. Second one is to go actually look for those instances without the S3 buckets and looking at them. By doing that, you actually find a couple of, I've found a couple of internal domains where if you go to, domain.corporate.domain.com, it wouldn't work, but somehow when you go to the Amazon Web Services, magically opens up a new door. Again, you can do more Google Docs for those patterns. You can go on GitHub, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and you can also automate your work. So what I mean by automating your work, you want to find the most bugs in a smaller amount of time. It's when it's a new program that a lot of hackers are looking for, you want to speed up your process. Back to the right side of the presentation, you can see that I'm just generally looking for Bugcrowd keyword on Google with doing Amazon AWS.com, which would give me Bugcrowd public, which I wouldn't have known it existed if I wouldn't have done that. And on the right, I was doing Trello. You can see the same thing. I did Amazon AWS.com and the keyword Trello, and it gave me a ton of results. Not all those are unique, but a lot of them are stuff that I wouldn't have found if it wasn't just with that search. So automation. Instead of going and trying the AWS CLI and trying a million different patterns, you should automate that work. So how that works is you get a list of subdomains. We already have subdomain brute forces. You take that list, you make another list of different environments or prefixes, so prod, stage, dev, whatever you want to use. You automate it and you catch them all. And by that, I mean, you literally look for different patterns. So not only I'm looking for website.asset.test for the company name test, I'm using it for test.com. I'm doing test before, after, putting S3 in the middle, and a couple other patterns. And it does that for every name in that subdomain list that you provided. And it finds all those different patterns. A shout out to Patrick and Tom from HackerOne. They both actually came up with this idea and we talked it through. Patrick initially published this, took it down, and we actually worked together to make this code. There's another one. There are other options you can use, one being Sandcastle and Bucket Finder. These were both actually mentioned in Haddix's talk. And this tool in particular, it isn't the best tool you can find to do this, but it kind of gets the job done. And hopefully I'll have this out on my GitHub sometimes next week. And you guys could download it and play with it. It's super simple. It also tells you if a subdomain exists and you don't have access to it. So that way you know that that S3 bucket exists, but you can play with it for different methods of taking over that subdomain or that S3 bucket. So what could go wrong when you're doing the AWS Recon? Sometimes you find S3 bucket names that sound like they're owned by a company, but they're actually not. You may actually end up going out of scope, depending on what the company rules are. So you may find a domain that you have read and write access on, but at the same time, that domain was taken out of scope. You can actually find S3 buckets that lets you list an entire the directory listing, but there's nothing really sensitive on there, and it doesn't really make a difference. And you can end up on third-party apps. And I've done all 4 of these, and I'm speaking on experience. Make sure that it's owned by a company, you're in scope, and you don't want to make the bug bounty program feel uncomfortable with what you're doing. So live and learn from this. So talking about GitHub. GitHub is another tool that I use a lot throughout my work. I think I spend more time on GitHub than actually hacking a program when it launches. And that's because you can find a ton of stuff that could help you find some really good bugs. One of them, again, I love patterns, environments. You can find how they're naming their environments. This actually has helped me numerous times to find staging domains that have less limitations and you can actually escalate your bugs. Been a ton of times that I've actually found API keys that were supposed to be used internally. You can find Amazon Web Service secret keys, and you just have to get creative with these patterns. So you can just do company name and actually find a set of keys that you come up with for that parameter. The parameter name is up to you and guessing what the developer would have used. But when you do a couple of these, you eventually get a hang of it. The other one is you can find internal credentials. I can't stress this one enough. You will see a lot of username and passwords just leaving developers leaving them on GitHub, which we'll actually talk about that in a little bit as well. You can also look for API endpoints. There are times when there are old API endpoints that you may have not known that a developer worked on 4 years ago and they left on their GitHub, and it's still there. And again, talking about domain patterns, so you always find those as well. So some of the example bugs that I found by the methods in the last slide, I actually found some really, really weird Jenkins instance that was Jenkins dash some really long keyword. Then it was behind a subdomain that was really weird as well. And then it was on their that site. And when I logged into that, there was no login required. I just looked at their builds, gave me all the Amazon Web Services, the key to it, and all their build info, and that was automatically paid out and fixed quickly. I've actually found a RCE on one of the programs that a lot of people know I hack on religiously. I was really bored one night, and I wanted to just see if they have made any mistakes on GitHub. On my first try, I found a file that was 1.5 years old that had FTP credentials. In the beginning, I didn't want to try it because of how old it was, but it's an FTP credential. It doesn't take that long to test it. So I plugged it in, I logged in, it worked, and I actually uploaded a file and got paid within the hour. I've also found internal, as I mentioned, employee credentials. That one actually gave me access to a subdomain that was designed to have all their mobile apps built in there. And there was a lot of CGI files on that subdomain that I don't think they wanted to be publicly accessed because of how crappy it was written, and that alone again gave me more bugs, and I was able to do all that through GitHub. So these are a couple of examples of what I would use usually. You know, you can do site.com, domain.com, and put that environment you want to use. If you find an environment you want to actually hack on, you search for it on GitHub again. So you go dev.levelup.com and you see what's on there that the developers have leaked on GitHub that's not supposed to be leaked online. Then you can also look for those patterns that we talked about, API keys, AWS keys, and so on. You can sample just the username, password. And if you're looking for API endpoints, the API subdomain or folder, and then website. You can also do it on Google by just going site as GitHub, giving the organization name or the company name, and that kind of opens up more stuff for you or it makes it easier. I like to go straight to GitHub. It works out better for me. There are tools out there, GitRug, Get It All Secret. There's a ton of tools. I like to do it manually just because there are times that I find a file that has a keyword password or doesn't have a password value set up or doesn't have anything assigned to it. But if I look up or down on that same file, I see some endpoints, other information that I would have missed if it was automated. So I personally like to do this manually. It takes a lot of time, but that's a part of doing a recon. And I enjoy actually going through all that just because it gives me a lot of information about how the application or the website works. So what could go wrong? You could end up in a company's CTO account, the CTO's account that happened before, and that could piss off a lot of people. So be careful to not log into too many accounts if you're trying them. You could actually find credentials that are for an employee that doesn't work at that company anymore, but it has some limited access. Not sure why. You're gonna find some old secret keys that no longer work. So always make sure you have a safe way of evaluating those secret keys to make sure they're valid. Just don't go ahead and copy paste and say, hey, found this online. I wonder if it works. Can you guys check? You can always just validate them. Just don't push your limits too hard, especially if you're not sure if that item is in scope. Again, there's 3 buckets that you find may not have sensitive information. And again, you're gonna end up on third-party apps. So always be careful with those. So talk about identifying assets for the companies we're hacking on. I know a lot of people are already using Census, Shodan, archives.org that Sean talked about, and JavaScript files. Census and Shodan, it's all about getting creative and actually knowing how the application works. One of the most simple ways of doing this is just to use looking at their documentation. I usually like to parse through their certificates. So example, you do Bugcrowd.com. It gives you every IP address that has a cert with Bugcrowd on it. Weird thing that I did find one day when I was extremely shocked was I just put company name plus the word internal. So example, Bugcrowd internal. And it actually gave me a company internal development subdomain or IP address that I'd never seen before. And since that day, just because this one instance worked that gave me a vulnerability for, I started actually looking at random stuff. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. This one didn't make any sense, but somehow it came up. Shodan, you can search by host name. You can filter through it with different ports. You can put a title for that host, like, hey, I want to look for Jenkins. So you do the Jenkins dashboard title. You can look for products. If you want to look for Tomcat instances to get an easy P1 or a critical, you can do that. You can look by host name again to look for corporate domains, and just by organization name. I like to do org and then one of the above, or host name and one of the other options. Just because sometimes the organization name that's attached to an IP doesn't come up the same way as when you search for it by host name. So always try and do different patterns when you look for these bugs. There's a great book written by the founder of Shodan. It's only $5. I would highly recommend buying it to kind of understand how Shodan works. He pretty much gives you a huge overview of what you need to know about Shodan before you get started. This actually was another one that I found a weird pattern of a staging RabbitMQ environment that gave me access to, I actually logged into it. My search query was host name. It was corporate.site.com. Then I found the corporate domain, so I did host name corporate.host.com, and then I actually just did a port number on there, which gave me that RabbitMQ instance, and then I did a whole port scan of with Nmap, so I scanned all their ports. It gave me some other port number that was like 8180. Went on there was some log files that actually had the RabbitMQ logins, which ended up authenticating me inside of their instance. So I had full control of that as well. Yeah, and that was extremely easy. That actually took me about 20, 30 minutes of recon, and it was 2 in the morning, and they were fixed by 3 a.m. So these are pretty much easier ways of finding critical bugs without digging too deep into the actual application itself. Archive.org, great way of finding old endpoints or functionality. So you toss in your target, you pick a date, you review their source, you pull, you look for functions and endpoints that are on there that are still working. You look for JS files, you parse through the JS files, and you explore them. And when I say you parse through the JS files, it's you look for endpoints just like Sean was mentioning. So as a part of doing that, I'm actually releasing another tool next week that Zaid and I have worked on, and we talked about it previously. That actually you give it a list of JavaScript links or files. So site.com/path to the JavaScript file. You can give it 20, 30, whatever. Parse through it. It would give you all the endpoints that are on there. Not only JavaScript files are good for endpoints, I've actually seen people put credentials or tokens in there as well. So always look for those. I've seen Amazon Web Services a couple of times being in the JavaScript files. Not sure why they would do that, but again, it's just looking for those and making sure you always are actively looking for it. And sometimes you'll find some internal subdomains, hosts that are not really easily accessible, or you can't find them with the other ways that you've tried. And then that also gives us more bugs, more bounties, and more problems. That was pretty much all I had for today. I want to thank you guys for letting me talk, especially with Bugcrowd for letting me do this. Everybody on the slide that's been helping me do all of these. Every tool that we have actually included, if I've included in this talk, is going to be on the Bug Bounty Forum website pretty soon. So you can actually go on there and grab them. And if it was a tool that I actually developed myself, I'll actually push this out all for LevelUp within the next week. And if I do have some time, I would love to take some questions. Once I figure it out.
Yeah, there's the Q&A box.
There we go.
I think, yeah.
So I have a couple more minutes. If anyone wants to ask any questions, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I will leave this up to the next person.
Hey, Ben, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, man, good presentation. I really liked it. Seems like a couple of the presentations so far have been about JavaScript parsing, and Burp should do that already, right? It should be able to parse links and paths out of JavaScript. In my experience, it doesn't do a great job of that, and so that's why some of this tooling is coming out to do that. But do you have any thoughts on like why it doesn't, or maybe the methods it misses, so that eventually those things can end up in a tool that we kind of all use?
I honestly don't know how Burp is doing. I think we actually had a talk about this same topic on Bug Bounty Forum with people that are behind Burp. But at the same time, for me, it's easier when you develop your own tool, just because you want something to happen your way, and not every tool that's out there is going to work with you. It's not going to cooperate with you. So that being said, the way we designed this tool was actually an idea given to me by Yobert. It's just a way of making it a lot nicer and clearer. This actually gives you, let me move this away. It highlights stuff to an easier way to read it. So if there's something that you may have missed, it's pretty much screaming at you on your screen. It just makes it easier to search for it. This is actually it runs on Python. It's just you can go to it. It's like a local host. You go to a local host and your port number, and everything's on the web. You can search through it easier, and that's kind of why we developed this in a different way than what most tools do it.
Cool.
I hope someone takes this file, the Python file that we're going to release, and actually develops an Burp suite plugin for it. I think it will be extremely helpful because of the abilities of crawling that Burp has. There's another tool that we may release sometimes next week as well with this. That's actually it's written by Schmiegels, Olivier. He actually wrote a tool that you just give it the website name, and it just goes and crawls for all the JavaScript files and downloads them to your local machine. That's kind of another approach you could have. But at the same time, Burp does all the crawling and gives you all the JavaScript files. It's just a matter of how you're going to go through those and how you're going to find those endpoints.
Absolutely. Thanks, man, for the talk.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Since there's no other questions, I'm going to hand this back to Sam.